Welcome to Day 12 on the Trail. We have 4 readings for today, from Luke 6, verses 12 through 40, from Genesis 21, verse 22 through 22, verse 24, the 19th Psalm, and the Wisdom of Sirach, chapter 13, verse 1 through 14:27. In Genesis 22, we find an incredibly important passage. In fact, this story from Genesis is used every year during Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. If you recall, back in Genesis 12, we were introduced to the story of Abraham with an interesting phrase, Lech Lecha, which means go to yourself. The path that Abraham takes when he travels to the unfamiliar land of Canaan was not just a journey from one place to another, it was a journey inside himself. Now, as the story of Abraham reaches its climax in Genesis 22, we hear the exact same phrase from God, Lech Lecha, go to yourself. However, this time, we find a much darker story. This passage is known as the Akedah, which translated means the binding of Isaac. Instead of traveling into an unknown land to begin a new life, Abraham is traveling into the unknown that will put at risk the promises that God has made to Abraham for an heir and a great nation. Genesis 12 carried with it the promise of a reward. Genesis 22 holds no such expectation. On the contrary, by its very nature, the Akedah can mean nothing less than the complete nullification of the covenant and the frustration of all hope for Abraham's posterity. In this heart-wrenching journey into the unknown, Abraham will confront his faith in God, who has been walking alongside of him after leaving Haran. Today, I'm not going to explore Genesis 22 completely. Instead, I want to give you a few elements that may help you in your own reflection on this passage. For example, the phrase, "Here I am," is used repetitively when Abraham responds to God, and even when Abraham responds to his son, Isaac. This phrase is formed by a single Hebrew word, hineni. This represents an intimate recognition of being fully present. That is, Abraham is fully present in this moment. All Abraham hears is his name, and yet he is ready to be fully present and open to God. Abraham seems to put himself aside for this encounter, and in doing so, demonstrates his humility and commitment to God. Another important word in this passage that appears in different ways is the Hebrew word ra'ah, meaning to see. A form of this Hebrew verb is used to describe the place where Abraham and Isaac are being led, Mount Moriah. Now, Moriah can be translated as the seeing place, or the place where you'll be seen, and perhaps it's both. Is Abraham going to Moriah to see God, or to be seen by God? Throughout this chapter, we see forms of this verb, to see, used again and again as shown in this slide. The idea of seeing is critically important to understanding the Akedah. Finally, God clearly knows what he is asking of Abraham. This very point is driven home in God's description of Isaac in verse 2. He said, "Take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah." God tells Abraham, "I know what I am asking. Isaac is your son, your only one, the son you love." While as readers, we know all this information about Isaac, but this is more than a normal father-son relationship. Isaac is the key to God's promises to Abraham. Also, to heighten this moment, here in Genesis 22, verse 2, we find for the first time, love is mentioned in the Hebrew Bible. As we read this powerful story, we are forced to ask, what does God see in Abraham? What does Abraham see in God? Here on Mount Moriah. In our remaining time together, I would like to briefly touch on Psalm 19. Here we find a beautiful psalm that encourages us to look at creation, to spend time outside, and to pay attention to what God has done and is doing in the created world. The heavens are telling the glory of God, and the firmament proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night declares knowledge. So tonight, I encourage you to take a moment and venture outside. Gaze up at the stars. Feel the grass underfoot. Spend time being amazed by what God is doing in this moment. What can you see, Ra'ah, in this moment with God? Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, stay on the trail.